In this video, you're going to learn 25 tips that you need to start reselling. All right, so let's talk about the very first thing that I feel like is the number one, the most important thing. Before you start reselling, you want to make sure that you open up a second account. You don't have to open up an LLC. You could just open up simply a second personal bank account wherever you bank. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want a separate account for all of your reselling transactions to go through. Then when it comes time to knowing your numbers, you can look back and you can figure out exactly how much you spent for inventory, your different expenses, such as any software that you purchased, any shipping supplies, anything like that. So that, to me, is one of the most important things that you can do when you first start reselling. Second tip is you need to decide what are you going to sell and where are you going to get your inventory. So what do you plan on reselling? Do you plan on looking around the house and just starting off with items that you're familiar with? Maybe you are like my husband, Casey, and you have a closet full of clothes, and those are clothes that you can actually resell for money. So that's one thing you really need to think about is what are you going to sell and where are you going to get your inventory? Because in turn, that is going to be the next tip, which is you need to choose a platform to sell on. So if you are going to sell all the clothing in your closet, then maybe Poshmark is going to be a good platform for you to start on. Poshmark is a lot of clothes sellers use it, and that would just be a really easy platform to start on. I really like the way that they do their shipping. But with Poshmark, when somebody buys something, Poshmark will automatically email you the shipping label. It's that simple. And then you can take that shipping label, put it on a box, you can put it on a poly mailer, and you can ship the item to the buyer. So it's really one of the most simple platforms to sell on. On the other hand, if you plan on doing retail arbitrage, maybe you want to go into a Ross, Walmart, Target, you want to go and you want to find items that you can buy for low and sell for high and buy those from retail stores and then maybe ship them into Amazon. That could be a really good platform. eBay is also a good one. And I mean, there's other platforms, but if you are going to sell specific items, where will those items sell best on? And that just might be a little bit additional research that you need to do. Number 4, which seems so simple, but a lot of people get stuck. Once they figure out what they want to sell, where they want to sell, next, you need to open up that account, that seller account, wherever you're going to sell. I will tell you with Amazon, if that's where you want to choose to sell, it does take some time to open an Amazon seller account. Now, some of these, what you're going to need is you're going to need your name, you're going to need a ship from and a return address. Those could be the same. They could be different. Maybe you have a PO box you want all your returns going to. Maybe you're going to open up an LLC, or maybe you already have one, and that is going to be the business information that you put in. Now, the next tip is to figure out how much time can you spend with reselling. Now, I have always said reselling is not hard, but it is a lot of work. And once you get into it, you're going to realize that you have to spend a lot of time doing it. If you are just starting and maybe you have a full-time job, maybe you can only commit to about 1 to 2 hours a week reselling. So that's just something to really think about. Figure out what days of the week you can spend doing that. I know that when we go out during the week, we have certain days where we go sourcing, certain days we have for prepping items. Now we're bigger sellers, so we do have a lot more inventory, but it is nice to know what days we're going to be spending on our reselling business. Tip number 6 is creating a reselling budget. Figure out what funds do you have that you can invest into reselling. The best part of reselling is going out and buying new inventory, going out to the thrift store, finding the items, the hidden gems that you know you're going to buy for X amount, you can sell it for this. That's the fun part. But before you know it, you might have maxed out on your budget and you might have overspent, and then all of your money is tied up in inventory. So it's really important to have just a monthly budget of how much you can spend and definitely stick to it. Tip number 7 is make sure that you designate an area for prepping items, listing, storing, and shipping items. So the items that you're going to prep, You're going to go out, you're going to purchase your inventory. Then when you bring it home, you're going to need an area to maybe get the items ready for a shipment to ship into Amazon. Maybe you have thrifted items that need cleaned up. Maybe clothing needs to be washed. Maybe shoes need to be cleaned. So you're going to want to make sure that you have an area for that. You're going to want a good area to list items. Now I'll share exactly what we do. We sell a lot of shoes and golf clubs and golf apparel and sporting goods. So the shoes that we have, when we bring them home, we have a certain area in our spare bedroom that we put all the shoes. When we are ready to prep the shoes, we bring them out, we clean them up, and then we have this shoe rack that we use. When the shoes are finished being cleaned, we put them on the shoe rack, and then that tells Casey or I which shoes are ready to then be photographed. So that area is just a really small area in our office, and then it kind of helps us stay organized and know exactly what needs to be listed. Then when we go to list an item, we use our spare bedroom or we use our office area, depending on who is listing. I like to list in the spare room, and Casey likes to list out in the office. And we have a separate area. Casey does a lot of golf clubs, so he's got this fake grass that he puts down, and that's where he photographs. That's his background. I have it's a foam board that we bought from Home Depot, and there is different color felt on each side. So on one side, it's white for the background, and on the other side, it's black. So depending on what the item is which background I will choose to photograph the item on. Now that is something that we like because we can actually put it behind our spare bed and take it off of there, so it doesn't really take up a lot of space. Some people use photo boxes. Some people just use their floor, but you need to think of like, what's the background going to be when I go to photograph and list the item? And then next, you need to figure out and designate an area where you're going to store the item, because before you know it, you're going to look around and be like, I have a lot of items that are listed. So make sure that you have a good area to keep them. And then when you go to ship the items, you're going to need space to get the items ready to ship, which then goes into my tip number 8 is making sure that you have enough supplies and the right supplies for reselling. Now, there are lots of different supplies and tools. A lot of them will depend on what you're selling and the platform you're selling on. If you're going to be selling on Amazon and shipping into Fulfillment by Amazon, which is FBA, you're probably going to need a lot of larger boxes. You're going to need a box cutter. You're going to need a pretty big scale to weigh the boxes, tape measure, scissors, things like that, maybe even a box cutter. If you're going to sell on Poshmark, sell clothing, you're going to need poly mailers. Now, Casey and I do have an Amazon storefront with a lot of our favorite supplies that we actually use in our reselling business. I'll link that down below. You guys can check it out. We do get an affiliate commission if you buy something through the link. Tip number 9 is going to be using an inventory system for storing items. When I first started reselling, what I did was had a bunch of clear bins, and I put a letter on the outside of that bin. When something sold, I used a custom skew, and when it sold, that custom skew would tell me exactly where that item was. Right now, we have a good setup that is definitely working for us. We transformed from using just cardboard boxes and putting numbers on the outside to now having uniform plastic bins that we purchased from Costco, and we put the numbers on the outside of those. Now, those are very handy. They're durable. We can stack them, and it just really works. So we will store all of our items in there, and then when the item sells, we just go to that particular numbered bin, and we can find that item pretty easy, because like I said, before you know it, you're going to have so much inventory. And so if you can start this at the beginning, even if you just have 2 bins, I highly recommend it. Reselling tip number 10 is when you are out looking for items to resell, use a calculator. Now, each platform is going to be different in terms of what they charge for. If they charge for shipping, if you're in charge of shipping, what the platform fees are going to be. So there's different calculators. When I'm out looking at the thrift store, I use the eBay calculator. And what I do is I put in how much it's going to cost for that particular item. Let's say that I purchased an item for $10 at the thrift store. I believe it's going to sell for $45 to $50. We have a basic store. The shipping might cost $9.89. How much profit am I going to get from that item? That is really important to get in the habit of doing when you first start selling, because you'd be surprised. Some people don't even think about that or look at those metrics. And then before they know it, they're not making any money. Tip number 11 is understanding shipping costs. That is like probably the most complex thing to understand, especially if you don't have experience shipping items. I do know that you can go onto YouTube and you can look up the different ways to ship. So maybe you're going to ship on eBay and you want to understand a little bit more on how the post office works or using UPS Ground. But the more you know about shipping, especially if you're going to sell on eBay, the better it will help you understand how much you're going to probably spend in shipping when you buy a particular item. Now, there are ways that you can also help reduce your shipping costs. So not only can you learn about them and know which services are going to be the best for certain items, there are ways that you can reduce shipping costs, such as the post office offers some priority free shipping boxes. Those are really helpful. You can look online, Facebook Marketplace, maybe OfferUp, and those could be really good places to find free shipping supplies. Now, tip number 12, photos tell a story. So making sure that your photos are very accurate. That could be improving the lighting that you have, where you're going to be photographing your items, using apps like Photo Room, maybe using the background removal on eBay, things like that. Photos are definitely really important, especially if there's an item, you're buying used items to resell. Those items could have flaws. It's really important to make sure that you're taking good pictures of any flaws or just what specific colors are. I know colors can be a challenge sometimes. Maybe a pink that you're taking a photo of, the pink doesn't look like the pink that you think it does in real life. You're going to want to make sure that you have a really good photo set up for that. Tip number 13, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. And that's where you just keep researching, you keep analyzing, and you don't start listing. So that tip is don't get stuck in analysis paralysis, just start listing. Because before you know it, you're going to have 10, 20, 100 items already listed. And really the best way to learn is to just dive in and do it. These tips will hopefully help you start, but in the end, you're going to learn so much as soon as you start listing. Tip number 14, use a custom SKU. I kind of touched on this when I was talking about an inventory system, but a custom SKU, especially if you're going to sell on, let's say, Poshmark or eBay, even Amazon allows you to do it, Mercari, but you can put a custom SKU. So let's say I'm going to sell this blue shirt and I go to list it and I'm going to put bin number 14. And then I'm going to put this blue shirt in bin number 14. When it sells somewhere in the listing, you're going to be able to see the custom SKU. Then you're going to know exactly where that item is. Now, I didn't really do that in the beginning. And so I would sell items and not know exactly which bin they were in, because before long, I went from having one bin of reselling inventory to having 4 or 5. And the amount of time it takes you to go through those bins looking for items, it's just a waste of time. So if you use a custom SKU, that's definitely going to be very helpful. Tip number 15, know your numbers, and know your numbers from the start. There's lots to do with reselling, but another good habit to get into is to start tracking certain things. So start tracking your inventory, start tracking how much you're spending, start tracking your mileage of driving from your house to the thrift stores, to garage sales, wherever you're going to find your inventory. Now, lucky for you guys, I have created what I feel like is the perfect bookkeeping tracker and planner for resellers. I did create this myself because I was always looking for one like this that had everything that I needed to be tracking. I priced it as low as I could, but there are so many pages. There's enough for an entire year. So there's enough for 12 months. So depending on where you start, there's spots for your yearly goals, your monthly and weekly goals. You can track all the inventory that you're listing, all the sales that you've had, returns, your mileage. There's a list of like where you source. This could be really useful if you are doing retail arbitrage and want to start selling on Amazon. You can track, okay, well, I went to Walmart on this day and this time, I bought these items, and it might really help you organize when are the best times for you to go out sourcing. So like I said, this book is on Amazon. It's $14.95. I'll leave a link down below. And if you end up purchasing it, I would be forever thankful. And if you do, definitely reach out to us and let me know what you liked about it, what you didn't like, because I can always make improvements. Tip number 16 is using software and tools to help your business. Now, this could be just like my reselling notebook, or it could be different software that's out there. If you're going to sell on Poshmark, Poshmark's really big on sharing your items and sharing to your followers. There's a Posher VA tool that some people use. There's Flip out there that is a cross-posting free service for resellers. eBay, within the eBay platform, has eBay promoted listings, which you can pay to promote your listings, get them in front of other buyers. Don't be afraid to invest in your reselling business, because that's how you're going to make more sales and that's how you're going to grow. Tip number 17, stay active on the platform. Don't just list and forget. I know a lot of people that are not getting a lot of sales. They're trying to figure out why. And one of the number one reasons is they're not listing enough. These platforms want to see you active. Now, you don't have to keep listing. I'm not saying that, but you need to stay active. So go through your old listings. Do you need to upgrade your photos? Do you have some incorrect information in your item specific? Does your description tell the buyer enough information about that item that you're trying to sell? Is the price good? There's so much that you can do with the items that you do have listed. So make sure that you're staying active, you're looking back on those and making improvements. Tip number 18 is to read updates and news on that platform. You will find out with reselling, these platforms are changing by the week. There's always something new that they're trying to implement or a change that they're doing. Amazon, especially with even just their back end and how they have everything when you sign into Seller Central, they're doing a complete revamp right now. Things aren't going to look the same. They're trying to implement new features. Same with eBay. Macari just introduced new types of shipping services that they're going to offer for sellers. So really just make sure that you are staying up to date on that. Whatever platform you're going to sell on, read those things. It's very important. That way you know of any changes on the platform. Tip number 19, always be learning and growing. And there are lots of ways that you can do that. For example, you are learning right now. You're watching a YouTube video all about tips on how to start reselling. That's perfect. There's lots of YouTube videos out there. We have our Freeway Flipper channel. There's other resellers that have really good content. It's informative and it's definitely worth watching just to keep learning about reselling. You can also listen to podcasts. By the way, I do have a podcast. It's called the Paycheck to Daycheck Reselling Podcast. I'll leave a link down below. You guys can check that out. I do it with my friend Ashley, who I have in fact never met in person. We have only met online. We met in a reselling leads group a couple years ago and decided to do a reselling podcast to give back to the community. We're not about drama. We are about just information and education and motivation. So if that's something you think you will be interested in, I'll leave a link to the podcast below. Tip number 20 is connect with resellers in your area. You can find them in reselling groups, on social media. Maybe you find them at the thrift store when you're out and about. It doesn't take long once you start reselling to notice other resellers when you're out. You're going to know exactly which ones are the resellers. You could maybe introduce yourself and maybe build a friendship that way. I have coffee every so many months with my friend Melissa, who I met through reselling, which it's great because reselling can get kind of lonely. There's so much to know, so much to learn, and it's really good to sit down with somebody else who is doing the same thing, has the same goals, understands about reselling, and that is a good way to grow as well. Tip number 21, be realistic with reselling. It's not difficult, but it is a lot of work. Sometimes you'll see on social media people showing how simple it is. You just go out and you buy this item and then you ship it into Amazon. You make millions. Is it possible? Yes. Does it take a lot of work? Yes. Reselling might not be a way that you can escape your 9 to 5 right away. But if you are patient, you take the time to learn, you have the right mindset, that's very important as well, then you could get to that point. But just be realistic with reselling. It's not passive income. You're not going to just set it and forget it and make all this money. It does take a lot of work. Tip number 22, don't compare yourself to other sellers. There's going to be things that you see on social media, people posting about. A lot of Amazon sellers will post all about their orange bars and how much money. You don't know the backside of their reselling business. You don't know how much they're spending on inventory, shipping, fees, if they're outsourcing everything. You don't know their profit margins. You don't know all of their business. So just don't compare yourself to other. If you see a lot of people having success, just keep learning and keep trying, and I guarantee you will be successful. Tip number 23, keep a positive mindset. And I think that's really important no matter what you're doing. You're going to have days where you're reselling, where you feel defeated. You feel like you're not making any sales. You feel like, why did I spend all this time doing it? But really, keep a positive mindset. Also know you'll see a lot of people complaining about different thrift stores. One of them is Goodwill. People complaining, well, Goodwill's raising their prices. They're, shoving the resellers out. Know that Goodwill was not started for a place for resellers to find their inventory. Know that it's an opportunity for us to go to and to find inventory. So just keep a positive mindset, and I feel like that really helps you succeed. Tip number 24, good customer service goes a long way. Now, if you're shipping stuff into Amazon and you're doing Amazon fulfillment by Amazon, they take care of all the customer service. The other platforms, you're probably going to have to interact with customers. Just today, before I recorded this video, I did have a customer that received an item. It was 20 years old, and they bought it for $22. It was this toothbrush that actually scrubbed the shower. It was sealed, but when they turned it on and they tried to use it with the batteries, it just wasn't working. So instead of asking them to return it or to ask for, other information, I'm just like, you know what? It was $22. That's the cost of doing business. It probably doesn't work. So I quickly went in, gave them a refund, and their response was, wow, thank you so much for taking care of this in a timely manner. So remember that with reselling, you're going to have to interact with customers. Good customer service does go a long way. You never know, by providing good customer service, what might turn that customer into a repeat customer. Tip number 25, the last tip I have for you guys. Before I share it, let me know down below, what tip do you think is the most important when you're going to start reselling? Which one did you maybe not even think about? Or if there's a tip that I haven't shared in the video, make sure that you leave it in the comment down below. I would love to hear from you guys. So on to tip number 25. The last tip I have for you guys is, if you can't keep up with listing, stop buying inventory. You're going to learn a couple different reselling words in the reselling world. One of them is going to be, people call it a money pile or a death pile. I like to call it a money pile because it's a potential that I'm going to make a lot of money. Now, before you know it, you might go out and buy so much inventory that you have all this inventory to list and you're not listing it. So one of the biggest tips I have for you is to really take a step back, realize when you have been overbuying and when you need to start listing the stuff that's in your money pile, or when you need to maybe start liquidating items. So you could have overbought. Maybe you bought too many clothing items during the holidays that just aren't selling right now. By the way, Christmas stuff does sell year round. Same with like 4th of July. But maybe you just bought too many at that time and it's time to liquidate. So don't be afraid to try to liquidate some of your old inventory, sell through it. That way you have funds to keep buying new items to make you money. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And until the next one, I'll catch you on the flip.